Welcome to your HealthTech dose. Today, we're jumping right into the thick of it, AI and pharmaceutical R&D. It's a space where the pace of change is just incredible, and it's forcing a total rethink of how we discover, develop, and actually deliver new medicines.
You know, if you're an R&D executive, this probably hits home. The speed of AI isn't just fast, it's relentless. It's making everyone question the old ways of making medicine. But here's the thing. It's not just about pressure.
That pressure is absolutely real, but let's try to reframe it for a second. AI isn't some tidal wave you just need to survive. No, it's actually the essential tool we need to manage the insane complexity of modern R&D. Think about high-need areas like rare diseases, where the old model just doesn't work. A solid computational strategy isn't a nice-to-have anymore. Honestly, it's the only ethical and viable way forward.
So, what are we going to do in this explainer? Well, we're going to nail down a few key strategic imperatives for R&D leaders. We'll talk about speeding up trials, building data you can actually trust, and making your product stand out. Then, we'll wrap it all up with the final mandate that ties everything together, unifying your teams. We're moving past just talking about AI and getting into how to make it actionable, competitive, and responsible. Let's dive in.
First up, accelerating clinical trials. And not just faster, but cheaper too. This is all about getting AI out of the early stage lab and into the actual clinic.
For what feels like forever, AI has kind of been stuck in the early stages, right? Things like target ID and compound screening, what the FDA calls context of use 2 and 3. But the really exciting shift, what's happening right now, is how AI is directly transforming context of use 4. That's the clinical testing and trial execution phase itself. And this shift is so critical. Why? Because those massive multi-site studies, they just fall apart when you're dealing with rare diseases. You don't have the patient numbers, and there are some really big ethical questions. So we've got to find smarter alternatives, and fast. And that's exactly where things like virtual trials and digital twins are taking center stage. They let researchers test things like dose response in really specific, hard-to-find patient groups.
And right along with that, we're seeing regulators get more and more comfortable with synthetic control arms. So what are they? Basically, they're comparison groups that you create from historical or real-world data. This means, in a lot of cases, you don't even need a live placebo group. That's a total game changer, especially when a traditional control group is impossible or, frankly, unethical to create. Okay, so that's trial design. Now let's talk about execution. Dosing. It's one of the riskiest, most expensive parts of any early-phase trial. And this is where advanced pharmacokinetic modeling is making a huge difference. We're going to look at two main types.
So here's the key thing to remember. These two models solve different problems. PBPK, that's physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling, it simulates the drug's journey inside the body. Think of it as answering the question, is this dose safe? This is crucial for vulnerable groups like babies. Then you've got QSP, or quantitative systems pharmacology. That's broader. It looks at how the drug interacts with the entire disease network. This model answers the bigger question, will this drug actually work? It lets you predict if it's going to be effective before a single patient is even dosed.
All right, let's move on to our second imperative, which really builds on that first one. Because all those incredible AI tools we just talked about, they're completely limited by one thing, the quality of the data you feed them. This is where that feeling of being overwhelmed has to shift into a deliberate, strategic investment in rock-solid systems. The foundation for all of this is what's called a cohort data management system, or CDMS. But let's be super clear. Building one isn't just about checking off a list of features. If you want a true long-term asset, you have to focus on flexibility, security, usability, and, this one's huge, scalability. You're not just building a database for today, you're building it for the AI of tomorrow. And that mindset shift turns the CDMS from just another IT cost into a critical value-generating machine.
Okay, but what about the friction with regulators? We all know it's there. They're still looking at these computational models case by case. So how do you get ahead of that? How do you proactively build their trust? You do it by mandating standards.
And the bedrock for this is the FAIR principles. This is just a brilliant roadmap. Your data has to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. What does that mean in practice? It means you have to mandate harmonized annotation standards for everything. It's those standards that make data truly reusable across different systems and with different partners. That's how you build verifiable trust.
We also have to face a pretty tough operational hurdle here. Data quality is deeply, deeply connected to equity. It's a known fact. Genomic datasets are heavily skewed toward people of European ancestry.
So if you train your AI models on that data and then try to use them in underrepresented populations, those models are going to fail. That's not just a scientific failure, it's an operational one too.
So what's the move? What can an executive actually mandate to fight this bias? Well, there are 3 key actions. First, you have to strategically diversify your training data. It's non-negotiable. Second, implement federated data infrastructures. This is a really practical, privacy-first way to train models across global populations. And finally, you have to mandate the use of explainable AI, or XAI. These are models designed to be transparent, to show a clinician why they made a certain recommendation. And that is absolutely essential for building trust.
This brings us to our third and final imperative, which is all about the marketplace. If you want to really differentiate your product, you have to look beyond just the molecule. You have to differentiate the entire therapeutic experience. And AI gives you some serious leverage here, right away. Imagine faster, more precise diagnostics using natural language processing, that's NLP, to scan millions of health records in seconds. Or think about more accessible screening, where a deep learning model can spot a disease from a simple retinal image, way before a specialist is needed. You can even generate high-quality synthetic data to solve scarcity issues, or you can augment clinical workflows to help get your new therapy adopted faster.
And one last thing here. You can strategically invest in what are called large language model-based virtual patients, or LLMVPs. What are they? They're scalable, cheap, and totally unscripted simulations for training students and clinicians. Now you might be wondering, how does that help sell my drug? It's all about making the entire ecosystem ready. You're literally preparing the market for your product before it even launches. That is a massive competitive edge. So we've definitely covered a lot of ground. Let's pull it all together now with the final overarching mandate for anyone in R&D leadership. Our 3 strategic pillars are pretty clear. First, accelerate your trials using in silico models and synthetic controls. Second, anchor your entire regulatory strategy in verifiable data, solid governance, and the FAIR principles. And third, differentiate your product's value using AI-enabled diagnostics and getting the ecosystem ready.
But look, for any of this to actually work, you have to institutionalize these technologies. And that leads us to the final, most critical mandate for leadership. That wall between your computational teams and your experimental teams, it has to come down. You must mandate what are called closed-loop workflows.
So what does closed loop even mean in the real world? It means you physically embed computational scientists directly into your translational teams. It means you adopt common APIs. Think of them as universal translators that let all your different software systems talk to each other. And it means you treat these in silico technologies as a core pillar of your science, not some add-on. And that brings me to a final thought. With the rise of AI and digital therapeutics, the value of your R&D innovation, it's eventually going to be measured not just by the drug itself, but by your organization's ability to maintain these incredibly complex and resilient IT infrastructures for decades.
So the question I want to leave you with is this: how prepared is your organization to actually shift its core R&D model, to move away from those proprietary siloed databases to resilient, cloud-native platforms that are built for the long haul? Because that question, that's what's going to determine who leads the market 10 years from now.